In 2016, a father and daughter disappeared while climbing one of the most dangerous peaks in America, Mount Hooker. No rescue team could find them. No remains, no gear, just a single photograph Skylar posted before vanishing. Smiling, with a storm rolling in behind her, for 9 years. The world thought they were lost to the mountain, until the mountain gave one of them back. And she wasn't who anyone expected. Then came the diary. Then the blood-stained rope. Then the whispers of someone still alive, watching from the trees. What began as a tragic climbing accident is now a twisted case of betrayal, obsession, and a father who may have faked his death to bury a secret. Because some people climb to conquer, others climb to escape. But John Everett climbed to disappear. And what he took with him was never supposed to be found. The wind howled like a distant siren, low and warning. At 11,000 feet, the world narrowed to breath, ice, and silence. John Everett tightened the strap on his pack and glanced at the girl trailing him by 6 feet. His daughter, Skylar, 15, her cheeks red with cold, was smiling. "Dad," she called, muffled through her scarf. "This is insane. It's like beautiful and terrifying." John chuckled, nodding toward the summit ahead. "That's Mt. Hooker, always both, just like life." To an outsider, they looked like any father-daughter hiking team. But locals knew Mount Hooker was no walk in the woods. It wasn't for amateurs or the faint of heart. Climbers had died trying to summit its face. The rock was brittle in places, the weather bipolar. Even in August, it could turn on you without warning. John Everett wasn't an amateur. He'd climbed Kilimanjaro, guided tours in Patagonia, and once saved a man from falling into a glacier. But this wasn't just a climb. This was a final summer before Skylar started her new school. A fresh start after the custody hearings and her quiet withdrawal from friends. John called it their healing hike, a reconnection. The last time, Skylar had agreed to come along. She was 9. He remembered how she used to braid her hair tight under her helmet, humming Taylor Swift songs under her breath. Now, she barely said 10 words during the drive-up. Still, something about the mountain loosened her. At camp that night, Skylar lit a fire and curled into her sleeping bag beside him. "Mum would freak if she knew how close we are to the edge," she said, voice tinged with mischief. "She worries too much," John replied. "And you're not a little girl anymore." There was a pause. The kind that left meaning dangling like a rope over a ledge. "You miss her?" she asked. "Every day." Skylar stared into the fire. "She thinks you took something from her." "I did," John whispered. "You." That was the last recorded conversation anyone had between them. Her phone still with some battery snapped. A final picture the next morning. Skylar arms raised in victory, backlit by a sky just beginning to bruise with storm clouds. She posted it with the caption, "Hooker ain't ready for us." They never checked in again. 3 days passed, then 4. On day 6, Lila Everett called local authorities. A search team was dispatched, combing the western route first, then circling out toward the cliff faces. Helicopters scanned ridges. Climbers from nearby towns volunteered. But the mountain gave nothing. No signal, no scent trail. Not even a dropped glove. It was as if the wind had swallowed them whole. Back in town, theories multiplied. He probably slipped, and they both went over. Someone muttered at a gas station, "No way." That man knew his roots, counted another. "I bet they holed up, waiting out the storm and just didn't make it." But the whispers got darker. What if he planned it, took her up there on purpose? At the search command post, Leela stared at the map. Her fingers traced the red-circled areas. "He wouldn't do that," she repeated, like a mantra. But deep down, in the places she didn't speak from, she wasn't sure. Not after how angry he'd been. Not after what he'd said in court. "If I lose her, I lose everything." One SAR team found faint boot prints veering off the main path, dangerously close to a known avalanche zone. But then they stopped, just ended in powdery silence. A week later, the search was called off. August turned to September. A cold wind swept through Lander, Wyoming, carrying with it the news that the Everetts were presumed dead. Their camp never found, their bodies never recovered. Only a ghost of a digital trail remained. In the months that followed, Skylar's last photo became iconic. Her smile wide carefree was printed in papers, pinned to vigils, blown up for charity drives. Her backpacking profile went viral. Hikers used her picture as a tribute to the dangers of underestimating the wilderness. But those who looked closely saw something else in the upper corner of that image. Beyond her shoulder, where the clouds dipped into shadow, there was something strange. A figure, a blur. Debates sparked online. Looks like a shadow from the clouds. No, it's too sharp. Like a person standing far behind her. But no second figure was ever confirmed. Back in Leela's home, Skylar's room remained untouched. Her journals sealed in a box. Her climbing gear still hung on the hook. She wanted to quit climbing, Leela once told a reporter. Said she only went because he begged her. No one could prove what happened, only that 2 lives went up the mountain and never came back. But the mountain keeps secrets, and 9 years later, it would finally give one back. The storm cleared 3 days later, leaving the mountain dressed in white silence. But the silence stretched too long. No text, no call, no "we made it." From Skylar, Lila Everett stared at her phone, refreshing the screen every few minutes. She'd told herself it was fine. John had done this before, gone off-grid longer than expected. But Skylar always found a way to check in. Even in the Himalayas, she'd managed to post a selfie in a tent with frostbitten eyelashes and a grin. Now, nothing. Not even a miss you. On day 4, Leela called the local ranger station. The man who picked up had a soft Wyoming drawl and a nonsense tone. "Ma'am, folks go dark all the time on that mountain. Could be signal loss." "I know, John. This isn't signal loss. This is something else," she said. "They're overdue." By sunset, the Park Service initiated a Level 1 search. SAR leader Tim Rooks arrived by chopper the next morning, grizzled, efficient, a man who'd found more frozen corpses than he cared to remember. He wasn't the type for long meetings or false promises. "We'll find M," he told Lila, shaking her hand firmly. "Either walking or otherwise." The first team started up the main route. Fresh snowfall made tracking impossible. No boot prints, no discarded gear, no camp. Remains, helicopters scanned ridges, trained dogs picked up weak trails, only to lose them in gulches slick with ice. Tim ordered deeper sweeps. Climbers with ropes. Drones with thermal. After 5 days, they found a climbing piton wedged into a rock wall about 300 feet below the Hooker summit. New rust-free, John's kind, but no rope. No harness. No trace of the people who used it. The mountain was answering with riddles. Back at base camp, reporters started to trickle in. First the local paper, then a Denver news van, and by the end of the week, a CBS affiliate. Father and daughter vanish in the winds. The headlines read, "Experienced mountaineer, teenage daughter, missing on Wyoming peak." Lila hated every word of it. She gave one press statement, choking on her own voice halfway through and then locked her phone away. Every buzz was a theory. Every DM a stranger's opinion on how her ex might have planned his own disappearance. They probably fell. One comment read under a viral video clip, "Sad but simple." Another was less generous. "Convenient timing for a guy who just lost custody. Wake up, people. This is a murder-suicide." Lila couldn't sleep. She sat by the window each night, trying to picture what Skylar saw before the storm hit. The last thing she posted, the smile, the clouds behind her. What had she felt in that moment? Was she scared? Was she already gone? Tim Rooks didn't like mysteries. In 27 years, he'd seen a lot. Teenagers who hiked in sneakers, drunk tourists lost in the snow, even a couple who faked a disappearance for insurance money. But this one didn't feel right. He studied the topo map each night like it owed him answers. There were areas of Hooker barely mapped vertical cliffs with deadly wind pockets, crevices so deep they never thawed. But John Everett wasn't careless. Every ranger knew his name. He was one of them once. He wrote blogs about gear prep. He taught rescue classes, so how does that guy vanish with his daughter without leaving a trace? By week 2, the search was upgraded to level 3. That meant full ground sweep, remote air support, and even cadaver dogs brought up from Colorado. Nothing. On the 15th day, Tim sat across from Leela in the ranger station kitchen. She looked hollowed out, like grief was scooping her out from the inside. He wouldn't hurt her, she whispered. I believe that, Tim said. Though he wasn't sure if he meant it. He said they'd be back by the 12th. She had school, orientation, he knew that. He stirred his coffee slowly. Sometimes the mountain just doesn't give him back. No, Leela said sharply. That's not an answer. That's a story people tell when they stop looking. He didn't reply. Not because she was wrong, but because she wasn't. The official search ended on day 19. Tim made the call. Personally, we've exhausted the region. We're transitioning to recovery status. If you'd like, we'll maintain signage and request any hikers report, gear, sightings, or remains. They're not remains, Leela snapped. They're my family. He nodded gently. Yes, ma'am. Privately, he hated the word recovery. It meant hope was an inconvenience. A formality. Publicly, the headlines changed again. Search ends for father and daughter lost on Mt. Hooker, no clues in. Disappearance, authorities say, but off the record. People had started to whisper other things at the sports bar down the mountain. A bartender told a customer he'd seen John 2 weeks before the trip arguing with a woman over money. Said, something like, if I can't have her, no one can. Swear to God. Others remembered that John had lost custody 6 months earlier. That Skylar cried after every drop-off, that he once told a neighbor, some things are worth dying on a hill for. And Mt. Hooker. That was one hell of a hill. Leela sat in bedroom, clutching her daughter's climbing helmet. Inside it, a faded sticker. I follow the summit, not the map. She hated that sticker now. Hated its arrogance. Hated John for buying it. Hated herself for letting Skylar go. The media moved on. Winter arrived. And the mountain, indifferent as ever, stood untouched. But late one night, Leela received a call. Blocked number. No voicemail, just static. She picked up. Breath held. Hello silence, then a low breath. Not John's, not Skylar's, just wind. The call with the static never left Leela's mind. It was absurd, sure, probably a prank. But it didn't feel like one. There was something intentional about it. Like whoever called wanted her to hear the wind. Like the mountain wasn't done whispering. She didn't tell the police. They'd already closed the file. But Tim Rooks, he still picked up. When she called, Tim, have you ever heard of someone coming down the north side of Hooker? She asked, voice trembling. There was a pause. You're not gonna like this answer, he said. That side's damn near vertical. No official route, no gear trail, no rescue log. No one sane climbs it. She didn't like the answer, but someone else had already asked that same questions, someone whose story nobody wanted to believe. Garrett Monroe had climbed most of Wyoming's high peaks. He was 28, with a mangled pinky from a fall in 14 and a grin that made people overlook the twitch in his eye. He lived out of his truck, worked odd jobs in Lander, and climbed on weekends like it was church. The week the Everetts disappeared, Garrett had been bouldering solo near the northern slope, testing holds for a new route. The weather had turned fast, so he'd packed up early. But just as he zipped his bag, something caught his eye. Movement. Not across the ridgeline, but below it on. A face so sheer, it looked like God himself had sliced it smooth. Someone was descending. No rope, no light, just a figure moving down the rock like a shadow falling. He froze, binoculars in hand, heart slamming against his ribs. What the hell? He whispered aloud by the time he focused. The figure was gone. He ran back to the ranger station the next day, adrenaline still leaking from his voice. I know it sounds nuts, Garrett said, but someone was alive. On the cliff, I saw them. Moving. Tim raised a brow. Which side? North. You sure? Garrett nodded, emphatic. Nobody goes down that side unless they're out of their damn mind, or desperate. Tim took the statement, logged it, and quietly shelved it. Too risky, too unconfirmed. Probably another climber misidentified in the storm. But the thing about stories, they don't stay buried forever. Dwayne Ledbetter wasn't a climber, he was a hunter, quiet, slow-moving, and carried himself like a man who never said more than he needed to. On the 6th day, after the Everetts vanished, Dwayne had been tracking elk on the western tree line when a flicker of light caught his eye. It wasn't lightning, and it wasn't fire. It was more like a glint metal or glass deep in a ravine, known to locals as Dead Dog Gulch. He squinted through his scope and saw it again. A blink, like someone was trying to reflect the sun deliberately. Dwayne radioed it in 2 park services. The dispatcher, tired and overworked, noted the call but didn't escalate it. That area had already been marked as cleared by the drone team. Probably sunlight bouncing off a rock, she said. But Dwayne knew reflection. He trusted his gut more than he trusted his rifle, and something about that glint wasn't natural. Later, when the report came back listing the Everetts as presumed deceased, remains unrecovered, he quietly stopped hunting that part of the forest. They ain't all dead, he told his wife one night, cracking open a beer. Or, if they are, someone was trying real hard to pretend they weren't. Months passed. Garrett's account faded into town rumor. Dwayne's sighting became local bar trivia. But Leela, sleepless, grieving, half-believing in ghosts, found herself reading every archived statement in the case file. She found them both. One man saw a figure descending a cliff. No one could descend. Another saw light flickering in a canyon. No one. Checked twice. She took a pen and circled their reports. 2 different men. No connection. Same week. Same zone. She emailed Tim at 2:14 a.m. You missed something. Look at these statements. Look where they were. Tim didn't answer for 2 days. When he did, it was just a single line. I'll drive out in the morning, but I'm not promising anything. Tim hiked into Dead Dog Gulch with a growing sense of dread. He hadn't been out this way since the 2nd week of the original search. The drone scans had come up clean. The area was dangerous loose stone, blind corners, bare, scat in every direction. But as he moved deeper in, he noticed something that made him stop cold. A piton, not new. Not rusted either. Just ... placed. On a wall that wasn't on any established route. He stood, staring. Had John come this way? Or had someone else? He marked the location, took photos, and radioed back to base. There's something here, he said. I don't know what it means, but someone was definitely here. That night, Lila watched Skylar's final video again. Not the photo, the video. It was short, barely 5 seconds. Just a 360-degree spin of the summit. Skylar's laughter in the wind. The camera swept around her dad, who gave a mock salute. But at the end, just before the footage, cut a flash dot far in the distance. A shimmer, like glass catching light. Lila paused it, zoomed in. Her screen pixelated, but she saw it again. That same flicker. She sat back, heart pounding. Whatever happened up there, ... Someone else had been watching them. It was early spring when the river thawed. The Fremont Trail, usually deserted after winter, came alive with the sound of boots crunching ice-crusted moss. Garrett Monroe, back from Utah and still nursing a fractured rib, had returned to hike alone. Part therapy, part guilt. He wasn't searching for closure. Not really. He'd already seen what he'd seen and, no one believed him anyway, but near the water's edge, where meltwater from Hooker drained into the canyon creek, he spotted something caught between 2 rocks. At first, it looked like a crumpled map. Sun-bleached, torn edges curled like burnt paper. But when he picked it up, something inside him twisted. It was a notebook, a small spiral one. Pages warped with damp, but still bound. The first page was smeared with mud and blood. But the name was clear. Skylar, Everett target, didn't move for a full minute. Then, slowly, he sat down right there on the wet ground and started to read. The Authorities didn't believe it until forensics confirmed the writing. Pen pressure matched her old-school notes. DNA from a strand of hair embedded between pages. The notebook was real, and it told a story no one was ready for, not even Lila. Especially not Lila. August 15th. It's colder than I thought it would be. The wind stings. Dad says the storm will pass by morning. I don't think he's right. He never used to be wrong. August 16th. We took the north side today. I told him it felt wrong. He said it was faster. There's no path here, just rock and empty space. I slipped once, thought I was going to die. He laughed. Said, I need to toughen up. August 17th. There's someone else here. That line was underlined twice, then scratched out, then rewritten on the next page. No, I'm just tired. August 18th. He's different. Dad. He watches me too long when I'm not looking. I caught him staring at me while I was changing. My base layer. I pretended not to notice. I sleep with the knife in my bag now, just in case. Just in case, what? Lila couldn't finish reading that night. She closed the diary, walked outside, and threw up in the bushes. Skylar had been afraid. Not just of the mountain, but of her father. Tim Rooks read every page underlined. With a pen in one hand and 100-yard stare on his face. Most entries were short, disconnected, like Skylar was writing in bursts, between snow, flurries, and panic. Some were hopeful. Some were shivering with fear, and then they stopped. The final entry was dated August 20th. We're not going back. He said it today. Said there's nothing left down there. That we can live up here, start over, just us. I told him he's crazy. He smiled like he'd been waiting for me to say it. I tried to leave while he was sleeping. He woke up, grabbed my wrist, said I was all he had left. I told him that wasn't love. He said, it's more than love. It's the only thing I trust. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out. I miss Mum. I miss the sky before it turned grey. The bottom of the page had what looked like a drop of water. But under UV light, it wasn't water. It was a tear dot. The diary ended there. But inside the back cover, scrawled so small it was almost missed. If someone finds this, please tell the truth, please. The media exploded. Skylar's diary found, was her father dangerous? Survival or seclusion? The final days on MT Hooker teen slept with knife to protect herself. Pages reveal people picked sides fast. Some defended John. He was just trying to protect her. The storm messed with their heads. Others weren't so kind. Sounds like grooming, sounds like obsession, sounds like she was trying to escape him. Lila stayed silent. She gave no interviews, made no statements, but she started sleeping. With the lights on, there was one more clue. Pressed between the pages was a torn piece of fabric. Deep green, almost black, synthetic, not from Skylar's gear. Not from John's either. It matched the brand of tactical jackets worn by professional climbers or instructors. The search teams combed records again, looked at everyone John had climbed with in the past 10 years. That's when a new name surfaced. Marla Dane, a former climbing coach. Mid-40s, once worked for a youth outdoor program where Skylar had briefly trained the summer before. She'd been dismissed for boundary issues with a student. No charges filed, no follow-up, and no one had heard from her since 2016. The diary, once dismissed as a tragic relic, had turned into a bomb. Not only did it raise questions about John's mental state, it suggested he wasn't alone, and that someone else might still be out there reading Skylar's words. Tim Rooks kept circling, back to one line. There's someone else here. She hadn't imagined it. She'd known. And whoever that third person was, they had vanished just as completely. That night, Lila dreamed of her daughter again. Skylar stood on the edge of a cliff, her hair whipping in the wind, diary clutched to her chest. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She just said, you need to go deeper. Lila woke with a start. She opened her laptop and typed, Marla Dane, missing persons. The name, Marla Dane, opened a door Lila didn't know existed, one filled with old photos, half-remembered summer programs, and silence from organizations that once praised John Everett as a trusted outdoorsman. But no one knew where Marla was. No address, no tax record, no online presence since late 2016. When Leela shared the name with Tim Rooks, he forwarded it straight to state investigators. It wasn't just a disappearance anymore. It was a pattern. Eric Lennox hadn't spoken to John in nearly 5 years. The last time they'd climbed together was in Colorado, just after John's divorce. The trip was supposed to be a reset. Two old friends with ropes and mountains and nothing to talk about but holds and weather. But that trip never felt right. You ever think about just not going back down? John had asked, eyes fixed on the jagged skyline. Like, what if this was life? Eric had laughed at first. You mean like, go full into the wild? You'd last 3 days without coffee. But John hadn't smiled. He kept staring. There's too much down there. Noise, courtrooms, people who think they own you. Up here, no one owns anything, not even time. Later that night, over a fire, John had started talking about Skylar, how she didn't feel like his anymore, how they were turning her against him. Eric remembered those words too clearly. If I can't protect her down there, I'll take her somewhere no one can touch her. Back then, it sounded like grief, like a dad coming apart. Eric figured he'd let it slide. But now, with everything in the new Skylar's diary, the missing instructor, the cliffside descent, no one could explain. Eric picked up the phone. Detective Carla Meeks sat across from Eric in a Denver coffee shop, notebook open. Did John ever talk about isolation? Survivalism? Escaping society? Eric rubbed his face. Yeah. A lot more after the custody hearing. He said the world was corrupt. That Leela was poisoning Skylar's mind. He started carrying around these weird manifestos, handwritten stuff. Rambling. Any mention of Marla Dane that stopped him cold? He nodded slowly. Yeah, she was at a couple climbing meets, kinda intense. Had this boundary-pushing vibe. What do you mean? I mean she once told Skylar she had a freer soul than most adults, and tried to teach her how to belay blindfolded. And John didn't stop her, didn't even flinch. He said she was just training Skylar to trust. One had filed complaints. No charges, just shadows. But now, those shadows had weight. Skylar's journal had placed both adults on that mountain with her in the middle, scared and alone. The psychological profile forming wasn't about violence, it was about control. John didn't snap. He slid, slowly, convincingly, with logic that only made sense above 10,000 feet. He'd always been charismatic, intelligent, respected in outdoor circles. But after the divorce, he stopped guiding, stopped returning messages, cancelled workshops. His last blog post was titled, The Cost of Custody. What the courts don't want fathers to say. The tone wasn't angry, it was messianic. He saw himself as a protector, a martyr, someone who'd been stripped of his identity and clung to the one thing no judge could take his daughter. That mindset, investigators believed, made him dangerous. Not because he meant to hurt anyone, but because he believed he COULDN. Single quotes T. The deeper they looked, the stranger the picture became. Bank records showed John drained his savings slowly over 8 months before the trip. Not in a panic but with intention. He sold gear, bought duplicates, stockpiled, freeze-dried food. There was no panic in the data. Just preparation. One email recovered from his cloud backup was sent to a burner account. She's ready. The others will never understand, but you do. You always did. August is the perfect time. Hooker is clean. This year it was signed J. And whoever you was it wasn't Lila. Tim Rooks stood at the base of Hooker that week, staring up at the cliff face he'd climbed dozens of times in better years. He didn't recognize it anymore. It felt colder. Lonelier, almost. Like it resented being pulled into this mess. The snow was melting now. Spring would peel back the secrets again, but Tim knew the mountain wouldn't give everything. It never did. Meanwhile, Leela watched the news coverage from her couch. Skylar's baby photo still propped on the side table. She thought about how John had once held Skylar after her first fall, how gentle he'd been, how patient. She had loved that version of him. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being her partner and started being a believer in what she wasn't sure, but it had buried their daughter in fear. Then, 3 days later, the mountain gave up its first real answer. A team of climbers, rerouting a new line on the southeast face, stumbled across something stuck in a crevice. A nylon strap, frayed but intact. Tugging it loose revealed a frozen bundle of cloth, tangled in webbing. Half consumed by snowmelt and time. Inside it, a skeletal body, a teenage girl's frame, still wearing a cracked GoPro. The screen had water damage, but one file blinked with life. It was dated August 21st, and it was Skylar's final recording. The ice gave up its grip, the same way guilt does, slowly, without warning, and all at once. A climbing team from Boulder was scouting alternate routes up Mt. Hooker, the south face, once perpetually frozen, now ran with meltwater and exposed jagged rock seams not seen in decades. What had once been permafrost was now a grave, being unearthed by global warming. Lead climber Matt Ibarra was midway up when his boot struck something unnatural, metal wedged into the rock. He looked down, a tethered rope, sun-bleached and half by time, led sideways along the cliff wall, disappearing into a shadowed recess of stone. At first, he thought it was old gear forgotten by someone reckless. But then he followed it. 10 feet, 20, 30. And that's when he found it. A shallow, makeshift camp carved into the ledge, a tarp shredded by wind. A rusted canteen. Bones clean, white and still, dressed in nylon and fleece. 2 bodies, one small, one tall, both motionless. One of them still wore a cracked GoPro on her chest. The authorities moved faster this time. By morning, a retrieval team had airlifted the remains to Riverton Regional. Tim Rooks, pulled from retirement for the recovery, stood grim-faced beside the medical examiner as the bags were unzipped. Skylar Everett. Confirmed by dental. Even after 9 years, her features had held partially mummified by the cold. Her face looked younger than her age, like the mountain had tried, in its own brutal way, to preserve her story. But the second body was a shock. Female, adult, estimated mid to late 40s, height 5'. No dental match, no ID, no wallet. Just a faded thermal shirt and a thin necklace with a cracked opal at the center. Tim stared at her remains. "That's not John," he muttered. "Not even close," the coroner replied. Leela arrived at the morgue the next day, clutching a photograph of Skylar when she was 9, missing her front tooth and laughing with wild braids in her hair. She asked not to see the body. Instead, she asked only one question: was she alone? Tim shook his head. No. He waited, then added, "But it wasn't John with her." That answer made Leela fold in on herself. "Who?" she whispered. "We're working on it." But they both had a name in mind already. Forensics worked fast. The older woman's DNA didn't show up in any criminal database, but when cross-referenced with missing persons reports, a likely match emerged within 48 hours. Marla Dane, the climbing instructor, last seen the same summer. John and Skylar vanished. Fired from a youth outdoor program in 2016. Never officially reported missing. Just ... gone, now. Found frozen next to a teenage girl she wasn't related to, on a mountain she had no reason to be climbing. The question screamed louder than ever. Where was John? Investigators reopened the case in full. Skylar's diary painted a disturbing picture, one where she feared her father, but hinted at another presence. Now they had confirmation. Marla had been up there too, but was she an accomplice or another victim? The autopsies began to sketch a story, but it was incomplete. Skylar's cause of death, hypothermia, likely after prolonged starvation. No signs of trauma. No defensive wounds. Just slow, quiet death. Marla's body told a different tale. 3 ribs cracked, a hairline fracture at the base of the skull. She died weeks, maybe months before Skylar did. Someone had broken her. Someone who never came down the mountain, the media exploded again. Bodies found on Mt. Hookerbutt, father still missing who was Marla Dane. Mysterious woman in cliff camp identified GoPro, recovered from Skylar Everett's body. Authorities say video could hold clues. That last headline burned a hole in Leela's thoughts. They hadn't released the footage yet, it had to be digitized. The GoPro's memory card was badly corroded. Its data fragile, but the recovery techs were working around the clock to pull every second. Tim Rooks watched over them like a hawk. They died up there, he told one technician. We owe them the truth. No guesswork, no shortcuts. Meanwhile, Lila did what only a mother would do. She scoured the internet for anything Marla had posted before. 2016. Old climbing blog entries. Photos from camps. Videos of her leading teen groups in rappelling exercises, always smiling too hard. And then she found it. A buried blog post from June 2016, titled, Some People Are Meant to Be Wild, on a defunct site called Echo Wanderer. The post rambled about breaking from systems of control, how society caged the spirit, and how you can only teach real trust through fear. And then, near the bottom, one line chilled her to her core. The best students are the ones the world's already trying to erase. I only teach those who are ready to disappear. Lila closed the laptop and sat in silence. Skylar hadn't just been afraid of John, she had been surrounded by wolves, still. One name remained a question mark: John Everett. His body hadn't been found, his gear wasn't there. Only Skylar's and Marla's. There were no fresh prints. No extra remains, no sign that he had ever died on that ledge. Only one explanation remained: he had survived. The headlines had moved on to other disasters. But in Riverton, Wyoming, the town hadn't stopped whispering. The bodies on the cliff, the girl, the woman, and the man who wasn't there. John Everett had vanished into myth. But now, the myth had a name attached to it. Marla Dane. For most of the world, she was a footnote, just a forgotten climbing coach. But to Lila Everett, she was something else entirely. Marla had taught Skylar during a 2-week intensive mountaineering program. The summer before she and John disappeared, Leela remembered her vaguely a wiry woman with sun-scorched skin, a clipboard always in hand, and a gaze that lingered a little too long. She was intense, Leela had told the investigator. But professional, or at least, I thought she was. No complaints had ever been filed. But then again, no one had been looking. Tim Rooks requested Marla's old personnel file from Frontier Ascend, the climbing school where she used to work. What arrived was the almost deliberately so. 2 evaluations, a single photograph, and a brief termination notice. Dismissed for repeated boundary violations with students. Specifics redacted. That raised red flags, even for Tim. This wasn't a misunderstanding, he said flatly. This was a cover-up. A forensic tech reviewing Skylar's diary under UV light found a scribbled-out name on one of the water-damaged pages. 2 letters were still legible. Marla. Had Skylar recognized her? Had she remembered something the adults hadn't? Another diary fragment, just a corner torn from the back cover, held a cryptic sentence. He trusts her more than he trusts me. He was John. And her. There was no doubt now. Investigators began pulling financial records from John's final YEARA second phone plan under his name. Prepaid cards, a shared P.O. box in Lander, registered to E. Mahla Dong Everett. Everett, she had taken his name. There was no legal marriage certificate. No digital paper trail. But she had signed 4 packages with that surnames. Plies, GPS, gear, protein, powder, maps of the Wind River, range, using it like it belonged to her. She wasn't just a climbing partner, the lead detective said. She thought she was family. Lila sat across from Tim, with Skylar's photo pressed flat between them. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, how long do you think they were together? Tim shook his head slowly. Could have been a year, maybe more. And no one knew. He looked away. Sometimes people don't want to know. Lila blinked hard. Do you think she helped him? Do it? There was a pause. Then, quietly, I think she helped him disappear. The GoPro footage was still being decrypted. The memory card had degraded in the frost. But a few short clips were recoverable, choppy, time-stamped. Incomplete. The first showed Skylar zipping her jacket against the wind, smiling half-heartedly. At the camera, John stood in the background, adjusting ropes. The second was darker. Nighttime, the fire crackled. Skylar's voice was low, almost whispering. He says she's coming tonight. That I need to learn how to trust her. I don't want to. I hate the way she looks at me. Then silence, then static. A different video, only 15 seconds long. Marla's face up close. She was holding the camera, pointing it at herself. Her expression was strange, dreamlike, like someone in a trance. The mountain is cleansing, she murmured. It makes us pure. She understands soon. Then a flash of something behind her, a movement. Someone off screen, then cut. A picture began to emerge. One no one wanted to believe. John Everett hadn't just fled society, he'd built his own. And Marla, she was his disciple, a secret lover, a co-conspirator, someone who believed the world was toxic, and that the mountain was the cure. Skylar had never stood a chance. The autopsy on Marla raised more questions. Her ribs were broken at odd angles, possibly from a fall, but consistent with blunt trauma. Her skull fracture was clean. No evidence of frostbite, unlike Skylar. She hadn't died from the cold. She had died from something else. A struggle, a fight. Had Skylar defended herself, or had John done to Marla what he feared she might do to him? Tim Rooks sat with Lila one last time before handing the case off to federal agents. He slid a photo across the table. Younger, in a bright red climbing jacket, her arm around a smiling John, somewhere high in the Wind River Range. On the back, Ascend Together 2015, Leela stared at it, hollow-eyed. She called herself Everett, she said, like she won. She didn't, Tim said. Skylar's still the only one who ever really mattered. Lila nodded, then whispered, So where the hell is he? The map was half-burned, its edges curled like old paper touched by fire. It was found inside a rusted camping pot at the edge of the makeshift cliff camp. The pot had been turned upside down, almost like someone had tried to hide what was inside. But when the forensics team lifted it, they found it. One word, still legible in bold red marker, just above a jagged ink circle. Nitrogen monoxide. Way out. Not a label, a sentence, a verdict. What survived of Skylar's diary came not from the main notebook, but from scraps pages that had been torn, folded, stashed into her bootliner, and miraculously preserved by the cold. Tim Rooks read them one by one in the evidence room, gloved hands shaking slightly as he pieced together the last moments of a girl who had been forced to live inside the unraveling of two adults. Broken worlds. Her handwriting changed as the days went on, at first calm, rounded, then sharp, jagged, like her pen was fighting the paper. August 19th, it snowed again. The clouds are low, and we're stuck. I asked Dad when we'd go home. He said, We're already there. I laughed. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Marla arrived today. I didn't know she was coming. She's different up here, like she's performing for someone. She said I needed realignment. I didn't ask what that meant. The reconstructed clips from the GoPro, now fully recovered, began to align with the diary fragments. In one, Skylar is standing on the edge of the cliff, wrapped in a tattered blanket, teeth chattering. She says softly, they're whispering again. I think it's about me. Then she looks at the camera dead into the lens and turns it off. No fear on her face. Just exhaustion. August 20th, they don't sleep at the same time anymore. When one sleeps, the other watches. Like they don't trust each other. Or maybe they don't trust me. Marla tried to meditate with me today. She made me sit cross-legged and close my eyes. She said the wind was the only voice that mattered. I opened my eyes, and she was just staring at me, not blinking. I don't think she came here to climb. I think she came here to end something. Lila refused to read the entries herself. She lets him read them aloud, piece by piece, like pulling splinters from an open wound. I used to think John was just broken, she whispered. Now I think he was breaking her. Tim didn't argue. Skylar hadn't died from a fall. She had died slowly, quietly, in full awareness of the fact that she was no longer seen as a child, but as a possession, a battleground, the turning point. In the diary was the shortest entry, August 21st. She tried to leave, that's all it said. No explanation, no follow-up. But the implications echoed through everything that followed. Had Marla tried to escape? Or had Skylar? Either way, the result was the same. After that day, Marla stopped appearing in the GoPro footage entirely, and the next entry, August 22nd, Dad won't talk about it. He keeps saying it wasn't supposed to happen this way, that she wasn't pure enough. I don't know what that means. I asked him if we were leaving. He said, "You're ready now." He gave me the compass and told me to draw the map. I think he wants me to take his place. I didn't cry. I didn't say no, but I'm planning something. The team found a final note tucked behind a rock under her sleeping pad, almost missed entirely. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a confession. I want to live. But I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm going to fade into the snow like she did. I think he thinks that's better. But I know the truth. I'm not her daughter anymore. I'm his disciple, and I'd rather freeze than follow. There were no entries after that. Only the final GoPro clip. The footage shook as Skylar held the camera in her hand. Her breath was visible, frost curling from her lips. Behind her, the tent flap opened and a figure moved inside. John maybe, but his face never came into frame. Skylar looked at the lens one last time and whispered something so quietly the audio engineers had to isolate and enhance it to hear. No way out. Then she turned the camera off and the screen went black. For Tim, it confirmed what they feared. Skylar hadn't just been lost, she had been cornered. Both John and Marla had built some belief system warped by paranoia and pain, and they'd dragged a teenage girl into the heart of it, and when it collapsed, she'd been left holding the pieces. Later, when the evidence was being logged away, Tim paused over the burned map again. The ink was faint, but still visible, jagged black lines carving through the terrain. Circles marking impossible routes, but in the bottom right corner, another phrase appeared faintly under UV light. Written in Skylar's handwriting. One final act of defiance. I will find a way out. And in a way, she had. Through truth, through survival life, not of the body. Then, of the story. There's a moment, buried in the weeks after the recovery, when truth stopped feeling like justice and started feeling like a warning. The mountain was thawing, and so were the lies. Tim Rooks stood inside the regional SAR command post, where the footage from the 2016 aerial searches had been transferred to modern servers for one last sweep. Drone footage, mostly some grainy, some warped by wind interference. Hours of snow-blurred ridgelines and icy cliffs, all previously reviewed and dismissed. But now, they knew what they were looking for. Not just a silhouette. A survivor. Footage dated August 27, 2016, taken 3 days after the final entry in Skylar's diary, showed something barely a flicker in the bottom corner of frame 912. A thermal scan blip. Movement against the SNOW FIELD. Enhance, stabilize. It wasn't wildlife, it was a person. 2. Far for facial recognition. But the gait was unmistakable, stiff, slow, dragging one leg behind the other. Limping. And moving away from the cliff camp. Could be a false positive, the analyst muttered. Tim shook his head. Or, it could be John Everett, walking out of hell. The direction the figure moved in matched a rough, southwesterly route toward a known backcountry storm shelter, tucked behind a crag called Devil's Hollow. It had never been searched thoroughly. Not back then. 2 days later, a new team climbed. Up under early spring skies, the shelter had partially collapsed over the years, snow-packed and brittle. Inside, the air was stale, cold, and thick with the smell of something long abandoned. They found old rations. 2 water bottles, one with frozen blood around the rim. A sleeping bag torn down the middle. A fire pit scorched black. And beside the rock wall, coiled carefully, like it had been waiting, a climbing rope. Faded orange dot, frayed and stained dark. With blood dot, no body dot, no boots dot, no ID dot, just evidence that someone had survived long enough to crawl into shelter, bleed, and vanish. Forensics confirmed it. The blood matched John Everett. Leela was called in for a second interview. She didn't ask what they found, she simply said, it was his habit. He always packed 2 ropes, one for climbing, one for emergencies. I used to tease him about it. The agent across from her nodded. Did he know this shelter? Leela hesitated. Then, he told me once it was his fallback spot. He used it in 2009 when a client broke their leg in an avalanche. Said it felt safer than a hospital. The problem was, if he had made it that far, where did he go next? The shelter sat at the edge of the Wind River wilderness. From there, routes spilled in every direction south to Green River, west into Shoshone, or deeper into the most remote corners of the state. But there was one thing more disturbing than his escape. The timeline. If Skylar's final entry was August 21st, and the drone captured a moving figure on the 27th, that meant John had stayed near the site for nearly a week after her death. Why? Why didn't he leave immediately? What kept him there? One theory hit the room like a bullet. He buried her. They sent in a sonar team to sweep the surrounding cliffs and ridgelines. 6 days, over 60 acres of terrain. 3 false positives, and 1 hit. A shallow depression near the edge of a glacier. All just enough for a body. But when they dug, there was nothing. Only the crushed remains of a tarp, and beneath it, a journal page, half frozen, but unmistakably Skylar's handwriting. It read, he said, we are the last ones that will be reborn through the snow. I told him I don't believe in him anymore. The page was stained red at the bottom, not blood, ink, the final word. Run. At headquarters, Tim lined the evidence up like pieces in a game he was no longer winning. Skylar, confirmed dead cause exposure. Marla, dead. Trauma. John, alive at least 1 week post-deaths. Shelter, broken into. Blood matched. No body, no remains. No trail, but there was one more clue buried in the background. Audio of one of the GoPro clips. A faint tone, repeating. Faintly, a weather radio. Signal from outside the search zone. Someone had been trying to tune in to a frequency beyond the valley. Someone who knew where to find silence, and silence is what he left behind. The old rope was bagged, tagged, and catalogued, but to Lila, it was something else. She asked to hold it just once. She ran her fingers along the blood-darkened nylon and whispered, you climbed down from your madness. But you left her up there. She gave the rope back. Then walked out without a word. Theories filled the internet. He fell into a crevasse. He was eaten by bears. He took on a new identity, escaped to Chile, vanished into the Andes. Tim didn't believe any of those. He believed in something simpler. John Everett was still out there, not because he wanted to be found, but because he didn't. The descent didn't kill him. It changed him. Back in the command tent, a ranger brought in a torn patch of canvas found snagged on a pine 20 miles from the storm shelter. It was black, waterproof, edged with stitched letters, barely visible, but unmistakable. EVRET tag, freshly torn. Recent, the ranger said it best. If he's still moving, we're not tracking a man. Tim looked out at the snow-covered peaks beyond the tent flap. No, he said. We're tracking a ghost. The tag with John's name wasn't old. Canvas torn from a custom pack. Gear issued only a few years. Before the disappearance, the stitching was fresh. The fray still sharp. Tim Rooks held it in his palm, under the fluorescence of the evidence room. Something about it felt deliberate. Like it wasn't dropped, but placed as if John wanted them to know he was still ahead. Watching Alive at the state office, Detective Carla Meeks reviewed old case notes with a new lens. All trails had once assumed a fatal end. But diary, the blood in the shelter, And now the gear tag forced a harder question. Did John Everett stage his death? The theory wasn't new. But now, it had teeth. She pulled a case from the archives. A closed missing persons report from October 2016. 2 months after John and Skylar vanished. A gas station attendant near the Idaho border reported an odd interaction with a man who bought supplies, paid in cash, and wore a full beard like he was hiding something. He also limped. At the time, no one connected it to the Everett case, but now, they pulled the footage. It was grainy, low-race. The man's back was to the camera. His hat covered his head. A hoodie masked the line of his jaw. But the posture, the slow drag of his left leg. It was a match. Or, at least, close enough to question everything. Leila Everett sat across from 2 investigators in a sterile interview. Room Skylar's diary sealed in a clear evidence pouch between them. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "He's not dead," she said. Double quotes, "Mrs. Everett, I told you he was a coward, but he's not dead, he's hiding. And he's been hiding since before they even climbed that mountain." The officer glanced at his notes. "We have leads. Nothing conclusive. You think Marla planned it? That she helped him fake it? She was too obsessed. That wasn't a partnership, it was a cult, and she was a follower." Silence. Then Lila leaned in, voice like steel. "Find him before I do." Marla's journal, fragments found in a waterproof pouch beneath her peck-offered glimpses of their plan. Most pages were dogmatic, wild, but one stood out. "He says we don't need the world anymore, that we're already free. But he looks at her differently now. Says she's not pure enough. I'm not sure what he means, but I've seen it before, in men who pretend they're gods. I won't be the one left behind." Detective Meeks circled 2 key dates. August 27th drone sighting of limping figure. October 2nd gas station witness if the man was John Glett, meant 5 weeks unaccounted for. Plenty of time to get lost, to change names, to change faces. She flagged the tip to U.S. Marshals and requested facial comparison across Western state DMV databases. Off the record, if John Everett had resurfaced, he wouldn't be John anymore. In Colorado, a wilderness therapy program quietly flagged a participant. Photo that raised eyebrows. Taken in 2020, a guide named Ray Daniels. Thick beard. Scar on the left wrist. Background unverifiable before 2017. He had left the program. Suddenly, in 20-1 no, forwarding address. But he'd told one staffer something strange. "The snow teaches you what the world never could. If you lose something up there, it never really dies." Back in Riverton, Tim Rooks stared at the old family photo from before the divorce. John, Lila, and Skylar at Yellowstone. Everyone smiling. John's arm around his daughter like a shield, and yet when the world cracked, he vanished, and she stayed behind to die. Tim had seen fugitives run out of fear, but John Everett, he hadn't run. He'd descended, down the cliff, off the grid, into something primal. Another tip came in from a ranger near the Grand Staircase in Utah. A hiker found a can of rocks arranged like a spiral. Inside, a medallion with a mountain range etched crudely into it. Homemade dot on the back, ESM, Skylar's initials. Marla single quotes is his. It was too intentional to be coincidence. Lila called Tim at 11:43 p.m. She didn't sleep much anymore. "You ever think," she said quietly, "that he wants to be found? That all these crumbs, they're not mistakes?" Tim exhaled. "If he wanted to be found, he'd walk into a station." "No," she said, "that's not how he works." Silence. "He wants to be pursued. He wants to be the ghost. The myth. The man who outlived his guilt. And if we catch him," Lila's voice hardened, "then we bury the myth, and we put the man on trial." The road ended 30 miles before the cabin did. After that, it was tie-rotted dirt and frozen riverbeds, threading through Montana's Sapphire Range, like veins, too stubborn to clot. The tip had come in from a hunter who claimed he'd been followed in the woods, not by a bear, not by a man, but by something in between. Sheriff's deputies didn't believe him, until he mentioned the name Everett and said he saw a photo tacked up on a wall. A girl's photo, torn down the middle. The approach was slow, careful. Two agents, in plain clothes, a local deputy trailing behind with a radio crackling low. The cabin emerged like a bruise beneath the trees, hunched, splintered, almost feral in its construction. No electricity, no running water, just smoke trailing from a stovepipe, curling into a sky too grey to care. They knocked, no answer. They circled, and that's when they saw it. Behind the cabin, nailed to the inside of an outhouse door, a laminated photo, weather-worn, taped, retaped, faded from years of cold. Skylar, Everett, age 12, smiling. They entered. The smell was what hit them first. Pine, old blood ash, a bit of earthy rot. Inside, silence. Dust motes hung like suspended thoughts. Walls papered with old newspaper clippings headlines. From 2016 to 2024, father and daughter vanish on MT. Hooker Schuyler's diary found clues emerge. Was John Everett a killer or a victim? Still, no trace of the missing mountaineer. The clippings were obsessively cut. Catalogued, annotated in red pen. One circle around a headline read, "They still don't understand." On a table near the window, there was a scarf, frayed purple, confirmed later by Lila as Schuyler's favorite. She'd worn it every winter since she was 10. I knitted it for her, she whispered during the evidence review. She lost it on a camping trip once. I thought it was gone forever. Apparently not. It had been kept, preserved, trophied, in the bedroom if it could be called, that there was only a cot, a lantern, and a cracked mirror, and taped to the mirror, dead center, a photograph. Skylar. Older than any other image known. Publicly, maybe 15. Maybe from the mountain. Her expression. Unreadable. Half of it was torn. The other half had a handwritten caption beneath it. She saw the truth. The man was gone. The cabin had been recently lived in ash, still warm in the stove. A cup of water frozen halfway in a metal tin. Boots near the door with mud not yet dried. He had left only hours before. Maybe less, but he'd left one thing. Behind blood. On the doorframe, ATHUMB, PRINT. The forensics team swabbed it immediately. Within 24 hours, the DNA came back. Match, John Everett. Leela stood outside the evidence locker, hands curled into fists. She didn't cry. Not this time. He didn't run from the mountain, she said. He ran from us. From everyone who might have made him explain. Detective Meeks nodded. Looks like he's been watching the case from the outside, the entire time. Newspaper clippings go back almost a decade. Why now? Leela asked. Why tip someone off? Why leave the scarf in the open? No one answered, because the answer was unthinkable. He wanted them to know he'd been watching, and worse, he still was. Agents swept the surrounding woods for days. Dogs lost the scent in a frozen stream. No fresh boot prints. No trail, but in a tree hollow 20 minutes from the cabin. They found a stash bag wrapped in waterproof tarp. Inside, a burner phone, a journal with half the pages missing, and an unmailed letter addressed to Schuyler. If the world deserves to know, the handwriting was unmistakable. John's. The letter read like a sermon, written in a storm. Disjointed thoughts, obsession, justification. They will say, I ran. But I stayed. I waited. I watched the ones who claimed to care turn this into spectacle. She wanted out. But there was no out. The world below was sicker than what we built. I tried to unplug her, unhook her from the lies. Marla didn't understand. She thought purity was in obedience. But Schuyler Shea saw things. Heard the wind the right way. I never hurt her. I freed her. She was never meant to be in that world again. And the last line, if they find me, let them know, I was never hiding, I was mourning. Psychiatrists who reviewed the letter unanimously declared John a deeply narcissistic survivalist with delusional martyr complexes. But to Tim Rooks, it read like something simpler, a man rewriting history so he could live with it. On the mirror, beside Schuyler's photo, Agents found another paper, taped behind it, hidden. It was torn from her diary. One of the missing pages, it said, "He says he'll love me forever if I let go of everything else. But I think that's what monsters say." The case was reclassified, fugitive at large, armed and emotionally unstable. Interpol was notified. So were wilderness border stations from Alberta to Patagonia. But deep down, everyone knew John Everett wasn't going to resurface. He was going to haunt the edges of the wild, stay half a step ahead. Sleep in trees, burn his name every time it came. Too close to being spoken aloud, not a man anymore, but a shadow, a broken idea that still believed it was whole. It happened in early spring, the kind of day when winter pretends to be gone, but the cold still lingers. Like doubt, John Everett was found walking the edge of a service trail near Glacier National Park, hood up, beard long, limping. He didn't run. He just raised his hands as the ranger stepped out from behind a tree. Pistol drawn but not raised. "I knew it was over," John said later. Not because of the badge, because the snow had stopped. At the county jail, the guards stripped him of everything. Packed boots, belt. Inside his pocket, a single item, Skylar's broken compass, still cracked, down the middle, still stuck on true north. The confession didn't come quickly or easily. At first, John played the role he'd perfected, the misunderstood father, the scapegoat of a judgmental world. He said Skylar had chosen to stay, that Marla had lost her way, that he had simply outlived the story people wanted to tell. But after 43 hours in custody, something broke, and he started to talk. "She didn't fall," he said softly. Detective Carla Meeks leaned forward. "Skylar," John nodded, eyes unfocused. "She ran, but she didn't fall." "Then what happened?" He blinked. "I let her." They had climbed with the intention to disappear. No phones, no trackers, no return plan. Skylar had no idea. She thought it was a training trip, a final adventure before senior year. But to John, it was a beginning. She was too close to forgetting, he explained. To becoming like them. The world down there doesn't deserve people like her. And Marla. She was supposed to help. John said she wanted out too, but John swallowed. She wanted to lead. There was a long pause. "I told her the mountain could only keep one of them." He admitted to arguing with Marla on the second night. She wanted to reset sooner for Skylar to abandon her identity. Her journals, her history. John resisted. She wasn't ready, he said. She needed to want to stay. They fought. Voices raised. Skylar overheard. The next morning, Marla was dead. "Was it you?" Meeks asked. John looked up. Finally, she tripped. Silence. Then, "I didn't stop her." Skylar tried to flee that night, took the map, the knife, the compass, but the cliffs were steep, the air thin. "She didn't scream," John said. "She just looked at me. Like I was the thing she never wanted to believe in. And then, I turned around," he whispered. "And when I looked back, she was gone." He never searched. He built the fire. He slept alone. "What were you trying to do?" Meeks asked. John's eyes glazed. "I was trying to keep my family," he said. Then, with a strange cracked smile, "The mountain just kept them better." Lila listened to the recording of the confession in a quiet room lined with soundproof foam. She didn't blink once. When it ended, she pressed the stop button, removed the headphones, and said only, "Now he gets to sit with it." And he would. John Everett was charged with negligent homicide, abuse of a minor, obstruction of justice, and unlawful disposal of human remains. But the real trial was public. The world wanted to know, how did a father become a myth? And how did that myth outlive his daughter? Skylar Everett was finally buried under an open sky. A crowd gathered. Rangers, search team volunteers, her old classmates, her mother, her friends, and on a wooden post near the grave, they mounted the compass fixed, polished. True north still cracked but gleaming. Leela stepped to the front. She didn't read a speech. She just whispered so everyone could hear. She wasn't broken. She was betrayed. And then, softly, as the wind picked up, but she never stopped trying to find her way out. The mountain was quiet for 9 years, but now it spoke her name. In the months that followed, documentaries were made. Podcasts dissected every page of Skylar's diary. True crime panels debated John's diagnosis. Was he a narcissist? A survivalist? A cult leader? A broken man? But one question never quite left. What else did he take with him? One final mystery was solved by accident. A ranger retracing the original Sarpaths stumbled into a cave one, long hidden by a fallen tree and a rock slide. Inside, tin box, waterproof locked. It took hours to open. Inside, a thumb drive, a video. File.time-stamped. August 22, 2016. 3:47 a.m. The footage was shaky. Low light, but real. Skylar, sitting beside a fire, looking into the camera. Her voice. If someone finds this, I don't know what the story will say. But here's what's true. He wasn't always like this. But something broke in him, and he's trying to fix it by breaking me. A long pause. Then, I'm going to try to get out tonight, if I don't. Please don't let them make me the villain. A voice calls her name, off camera. She turns. The screen goes dark. Then, her scream, and the sound of wind. The footage was never released publicly, but it was enough to prove intent. Enough to silence doubters, enough to remind everyone that Skylar Everett was not just a victim of the mountain, she was a victim of love, turned toxic, of control disguised as protection, of a father who couldn't let go, so he let her fall. In the final court hearing, Leela was offered the chance to speak directly to John. She declined, but she left a letter on the bench. It read, "You never built a home in those cliffs, you built a cage, and she escaped the only way she could. You call it peace, I call it prison. And now, you'll live in one." The prison assigned John to solitary, not for punishment but for protection. Other inmates didn't take kindly to child abusers. He spends his days in silence, tracing the cracks on his cell wall, imagining the wind, but the world moved on. And Skylar Everett, she became more than the girl who vanished. She became the one who left a map in pieces, a compass still cracked, a voice that refused to be buried in snow.